she said. "I can't have children." The cowboy smiled. "Good, I only wanted you." The rope creaked like an old hinge in a ghost town door. It bit Ruth Calder's wrists as she dangled from the hay hoist, toes barely brushing splinters on the granary floor. Lantern smoke clawed her throat. The place smelled of mouse droppings, spilled molasses, and something rank from the cattle pens outside. A storm dragged its belly over the flats, rattling the tin roof, and each gust made the hoist beam groan. She could hear spurs ticking where the men waited, bored, eager, certain of their power. "Cold feet won't save you, schoolmarm," said Luther Vane, whose cattle brand burned more land than the sun. He wore a black frock coat shiny with rain, and a grin that showed a gold tooth. "Your daddy signed the paper. You'll be Mrs. Vane by sunrise." His voice was silk over barbed wire. Ruth's blue calico dress hung torn where they'd dragged her from the wagon. She was 26 and had learned to keep her chin up, but tears had cut clean tracks through the dust on her face. She twisted her wrists against the rope, felt it burn, heard the faint scrape of the pulley. The men laughed. Boots crunched outside, then the tight jink of tack. Thunder rolled. Ruth's mind leaped. Neighbors. Marshall. No one. Nobody crossed Luther. The windmill by the holding pond creaked its slow prayer, and in that sound she heard what her mother used to say. "In the worst dark, listen. It'll tell you where the next light is." Vane stepped close, breath hot with whiskey and mint. He brushed a stray curl from Ruth's brow. "Don't fight what money already decided," he said. "The Reverend's waiting. My boys are witnesses." He jerked his chin at Pike and Jonah, wolves in human shapes, who each smirked as if cruelty were a coin you flipped to pass the time. Ruth dragged air into a chest that wouldn't settle. She had thought she was brave. She had thought when her father's liver failed and the bank circled like buzzards that she could broker with thunderheads. She had been wrong. The rope creaked overhead. She felt the rope's tiny fibers grating, a slow saw against skin. Thunder cracked closer. In the pause, a horse snorted, and a saddle leather sighed. A man's shadow slid beneath the granary door, followed by the metallic, thoughtful click of a hammer drawn back. Ruth closed her eyes, heart leaping at nothing. But whose boots were those, friend or another wolf? The door latch lifted with a careful hand, and the night brought someone colder than rain inside. Luther Vane's empire had been raised on the bones of other men's hopes. He had a way of smiling as he ruined you, as if your ruin were the small talk before supper. The story around the red wires was that his father died mean and childless, and Luther swore his seed would fill the frontier like a plague of locusts. He didn't need a wife, he wanted a broodmare. Land needed heirs to keep a brand eternal. Without them, a family name was just dust that hadn't remembered how to fall. He tapped his cane, iron-shod, and paced in front of Ruth. "The Reverend." "Dunno," he said to Pike, "we're losing the night." Pike, narrow as a pick, slipped out to fetch the man who'd bless crimes for the price of a bottle. "And you," Luther murmured to Ruth, "after you sign and warm my house, we'll be finished paying your father's debts. Your children will never know the word mortgage." Ruth's throat closed. The rope rasped as she pulled. Splinters stabbed her ankles. "I won't," she started, but Luther's hand cracked across her cheek sharp as a rifle's note. Fire burst along her jaw. The men laughed again. Jonah's knife winked under the lantern, carving at a wedge of apple, each slice exaggerating his patience. "Won't?" Luther's smile thinned. "Won't" is poor people language. Boots crunched outside, then halted. Rain pattered in a soft curtain. Pike returned not with a preacher, but with another gust of cold. "Marshall's sick tonight," he called, meaning the coward they sometimes paid to look official. "But Reverend Grimes is waiting by the windmill. Says he'll marry anything with a pulse." "Good," Luther said. His gaze flicked to the rope, then the iron hook that held it. "Cut her down. Tie her hands in front, bride-like. We'll walk her to the pond, nice and solemn." Jonah slid his knife into the rope. It let go with a sigh. Ruth fell hard to her knees, pain cracking up her shins. He jerked her arms forward and looped a rawhide thong around her wrists, pulling until the bones in her hands ground. When he yanked her upright, her dress rustled like dry grass. Vane leaned close, voice intimate as blasphemy. "You'll learn sweet, or you'll learn slow." The granary door creaked open. The storm's breath washed over Ruth's face, cool, clean. Someone stood there, a big silhouette framed by rain, hat brim dripping. Her saddle blanket hung over one shoulder, and a long coat clung to a body square as a fence post sunk deep. "Evening," the man said, voice rasped on gravel and tobacco. "Heard somebody say vows. Thought maybe I'd witness." He looked 50, sun-creased like old leather with a single white scar cutting from left ear to jawline. The sort of man who had decided long ago which wolves he would feed. Luther's eyes chilled. "You're trespassing." The stranger's boot nudged a coil of rope that still carried Ruth's heat, and his jaw flexed once. "Maybe," he said mildly, "or maybe I'm standing where a man's conscience told me to." His hand rested easy on the worn walnut of a Colt. Ruth felt something like breath return, and hate herself for believing. But the men around Luther began to spread, amused by a new plaything. Thunder growled, and in the lantern's sway, the stranger's eyes hardened like winter river ice. He introduced himself without flourish. "Name's Harlan Boone." The syllables settled unafraid. Ruth watched him from the edge of her fear and found details. The grey in his beard like frost, the denim shirt darkened by rain, the cracked brim of a hat that had seen too many noons. A nicked wedding band hung from a leather thong at his neck. He looked like a man who carried ghosts the way other men carried pocket knives. "Boone," Luther said, tasting it, "I knew your brother. He drank himself into the ground after I foreclosed his squat." The smile was all teeth. "Seems the Boones have a problem with money." Harlan's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked once at Ruth, once at the rawhide digging her wrists. The windmill creaked outside, a lonely hinge on the prairie's gate. "Seems the Vanes have a problem with mercy," Harlan answered. The men tittered. Jonah rolled his shoulders, knife now loose in his hand. Pike's fingers hovered near his belt where a revolver sat, itching for purpose. 4 more of Luther's riders lounged in the doorway, half in rain, half in smoke, a fence line of meat and malice. "Walk away," Luther said, not angry so much as bored. "This is the law. She's bought. Her father drank through one winter too many and signed his girl to save his hide. You want to die over some schoolmarm with a broken mule and 3 chalkboards." Harlan took 1 step forward. Boards creaked under his weight. Water dripped from his hat onto the floor in patient taps. "I ain't much of a lawman," he said, "but I can count." His eyes tracked the room, the distance between men, the grain in the boards, the way Pike's thumb stroked his gun horn when he got nervous. He had not lifted his Colt yet, but his hand knew the way. "Count to your last breath," Jonah said, grin widening. 1, 2. Harlan moved like a secret he'd been saving. His Colt, cleared leather, spoke once, and the lantern on the far post shattered. Darkness swallowed half the room. In the sudden night, men cursed and feet scrambled. A knife kissed wood. The second shot took the rope pulley's iron bracket, which shrieked and plunged in a rain of sparks, tangling around Pike's boots. He went down with a sound like a calf in a branding pen. "Trash parlor tricks," Luther said softly, stepping back toward the open door where the storm gave him outline. "You think shadow favors you?" Boys, gunfire cracked. Splinters spit from the grain bins. Harlan shoved Ruth sideways, shouldered her behind a stack of burlap that coughed wheat dust. His body was a wall. The Colt spoke again, and Jonah's curse cut short with a raw grunt. A bullet hissed past Ruth's ear, hot air stroking hair. The rope around her wrists burned as she dragged it against a nail head until skin split. Boots thudded. A man lunged. Harlan met him with the flat of the Colt and a hard elbow, and the man found sleep on the floorboards. Outside, horses tossed, frightened by thunder and the arithmetic of violence. Harlan bent close to Ruth, his breath steady despite the storm and gunfire. "Can you run?" he asked. She nodded. "If I had hands." He slid his knife and split the thong. It dropped like a dead snake. Ruth flexed, pain flashing white. "Go," he said, to the windmill. "Crouch in the cattails. If I don't come—" "You'll come," she said, surprising herself. He gave the ghost of a smile. "Then you wait till I do." A round smashed into the beam above them, showering splinters like stinging rain. Harlan rose from cover like an old tree, remembering it could still bend the wind, and the next shot was coming straight for his heart. The bullet found Harlan's shoulder instead. It punched through meat and left a black flower blooming under his shirt. He grunted, more insult than pain, and fired back twice, low and mean. Pike screamed and stayed down this time. Luther retreated into the rain, calling orders. Reshaping the fight to ground he preferred, open, wet, full of sky where thunder made men jerk. Harlan grabbed Ruth's hand and pulled her through the doorway. Rain slapped their faces. The windmill turned slow and tired, creak-creak like a giant remembering sorrow. Cattails hissed around the pond. Frogs went silent as if their throats had been thumbed. The Reverend, a crowish man in a black coat, squatted by the pump, hat clamped to his head, eyes huge as lantern lenses. "Go," Harlan told him. Grimes went. Behind them, boots pounded and voices cursed. Muzzles flared in the rain, each blossom of light a little summer stolen from the storm. Harlan led Ruth in a half-crouch along the windmill's shadow to the low cut that led toward the limestone wash. His blood watered the clay in a dotted line. "Leave him!" Luther shouted. "Take the girl." That line fed Ruth something fierce. "Leave him," he'd said, as if Harlan were already a corpse. She slipped under Harlan's arm, took his weight despite the tremor it brought to her spine. "Not this time," she said through her teeth. The world had always asked her to weigh men's comfort against her own. Tonight she would carry what mattered. They stumbled into the wash, a pale lane of stone framed by willow roots. Above, lightning laid bones over the clouds. The air smelled of wet iron and broken sage. The wash bent left where an old trestle crossed, 3 timbers and thick rope. The rope creaked as the wind pulled. Below, the wash narrowed into a throat of rock, deep and dark. Across, Harlan rasped. Then up the draw. Ruth looked at the trestle, at the way the boards shivered when the wind set a hand on them. Behind, men splashed into the wash, their laughter bright as coins. She set her foot, felt the board bow, and stepped anyway. Harlan followed, the trestle's rope singing under his weight. His right hand white on the rail, his left arm slick with blood. Halfway across, a bullet tore the rope at the far post. The bridge jerked like a spooked horse and fell to a wild angle. Ruth screamed, grabbed at rope burn and sky, boots scraping. Harlan lunged, caught the remaining rope with his wounded arm, swore like prayer, and anchored them with the stubborn gravity of a man who hadn't finished paying for his sins. "Move," he barked. The wash below gaped like a hungry mouth. Ruth crawled the last 10 feet on knees and palms, skin flayed, teeth clenched around a small sound that had been waiting all night. She reached the far lip, rolled over and found a rock to grip as if it were a friend. Harlan came after, face grey, shoulder streaming. The moment his boots cleared, the trestle gave up pretending and sagged into the throat, ropes twanging, timber clattering into the dark. Jonah and the others skidded to the edge, cursing. Luther stood a step back in the storm, hat brim shadowing his eyes, calculating angles, as if the rain were a ledger. "There's another path," he said. "Circle right." Ruth pulled Harlan up the draw where cottonwoods made a green cave. She could feel his breath shorten and roughen. He staggered once. She caught him again. "Leave me," he rasped, irony bitter. "I'll slow you." She thought of the pulley's rasp, of gold teeth and apple slices. "I don't leave what stands between me and hell," she said. A rifle cracked. Bark exploded near her ear. Ruth dragged Harlan into the root's shelter as silhouettes spilled into the drawer above, and she realized the only way out was straight through Luther vein. They reached a shallow cave punched into the limestone, a place where rain had taught rock to be gentle. Harlan sagged against the wall. His breath came in rags. Ruth tore her skirt, pressed cloth to the wound. He watched her with a kind of wonder men keep hidden until they're sure they're dying. "You don't owe me more pain," he said. She lifted her eyes. Blue in the storm's grey, fierce now. "You walked into a rope for me," she said. "We're square when you dance at my choosing." She cinched a knot that made him bite a curse. Outside, boots slid on wet stone, and men joked to keep from hearing their fear. Harlan laid his head back, rain-spattered hair against limestone. "When I came in that door," he said, voice low, "I remembered a winter, my wife Mary. Fever took the child she carried and then took her. I rode 3 days without seeing a horizon. Found a windmill just like that one, and slept under it, hat over my face, thinking I'd let the prairie finish the job. Woke up to the creaking and thought, if the world still makes that sound, I can make one more step." Ruth's hands stilled. She looked at him for a long beat, and thunder filled the spaces words could not. "I can't have children," she said, saying it was like opening a wound you'd become good at bandaging. "Fever when I was 15. Doctor said the seedbed's gone hard. Men here talk like a woman is only a cradle they set in a house they own." She swallowed. "That's why men like Luther think they can price me. I'm cheap." Harlan turned his face toward her with an effort that looked like it cost him half his remaining coin. His eyes were steady as trail stars. "Good," he said, and the word surprised even him with its softness. "I only wanted you." Something in Ruth's ribcage shifted, like a locked door remembering where it put the key. She pressed her palm to the bandage again. "All right," she whispered. "Then we go by our sunrise." Luther's silhouette blocked the cave mouth. Rain lamped his shoulders. The gold tooth flashed. "Romance in a ditch," he said. "I'll put it on your stone." Harlan pushed to his feet. He swayed, caught himself. The Colt hung loose in his right hand. "You're real fond of graves," he said. "Figure you ought to learn how to lie down in one." Shots cracked like thrown plates. Sparks jumped from rock. Ruth dropped to a knee and grabbed the fallen rifle of a man who'd rushed too fast and met Harlan's bullet. The wood was slick. The iron was cold. The moment was clear. She remembered her father's voice teaching her to sight along a broom handle, to swat June bugs. She planted the butt in the mud, braced and breathed out. Luther advanced, pistol up, the storm crowning him with electric whisper. "You think that old hand can keep me?" He sneered. "Not alone," Ruth said and squeezed. The rifle kicked into her shoulder, a mule's temper. Luther buckled as if a string had been cut. He staggered 2 steps and sat hard in the mud, mouth shaped like a question he'd never ask. The gold tooth caught one last lightning flash, then went dull. Pike and Jonah's replacements, men without names because cruelty had taken even that from them, hesitated. Looking at the cave, the woman with the smoking rifle, the old cowboy bleeding and still standing. The windmill creaked, a sound like a verdict. They ran. Ruth lowered the rifle. Her hands shook in aftershock. Harlan slid his Colt back into leather with a hiss, then slid down next to her. For a while they only breathed and listened to the storm empty itself. When the rain eased, dawn found them, gray first, then the thin gold that makes everything honest. Birds began an argument about existence. The windmill turned slow, patient, as if counting heartbeats. Ruth helped Harlan to his feet and wrapped her arm around his waist. Together they walked through mud that remembered blood and thunder, past a gold tooth winking in the muck like a bad joke that had lost its timing. At the windmill, Ruth pressed her forehead to a wet timber and laughed once, ragged and free. Harlan touched the wood like it was an altar. The Reverend peeped from behind a pump barrel and scurried off, suddenly full of appointments in the next county. The horizon lifted its shoulders. The world shook rain from its hair. Ruth looked at Harlan. He looked back. A man and a woman with no children between them. And a future as wide as the spaces dying men try to fence. "People will talk," she said. "They always did," he said. "We can let them learn what else a woman is," she said. "Teacher, friend, partner, whole." Harlan's mouth twitched. "Whole's a fine word." She took his hand. It was rough as a trail map. "If you were me," she said to the empty windmill and the watching day, "what would you do next?" She turned to the space where a lens might be. "If you were in my place with your wrist still burning and the storm still in your bones, what choice would you make?" She held that question out to the dust, to the cattle, to the men who'd come looking for stories and found themselves in mirrors. "Like this story and subscribe for the next Wild West tale," she said, voice steady now, teacher calm. "And if you want to see how the next battle unfolds, don't miss the next story. Subscribe now." The windmill answered with one last creak as the sun cleared the ridge, and the prairie exhaled, and somewhere a new day set its boots on the floor.